We'll be calling the meeting to order soon. All right, it is now 5:31, and we'll go ahead and start the special meeting for the Missoula County Public Schools Board of Trustees. On to item number 2, which is the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, so now we'll move on to item number 3, which is public comment on non-agenda items. The public comment portion of the meeting is set aside for the public to address the board as a body. It is not a time for board response or for the public to ask questions. Do not infringe on the right to privacy of others. Please sign in and spell your first and last name. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per speaker. The chair may interrupt or terminate an individual speaker if the statements are out of order, over 3 minutes, and personally directed to an individual. Any public comment on non-agenda items? Seeing none, we'll move on to item number 4, which is the superintendent search update. I will now turn the time over to Dr. Steve Joel and Charlotte Anderson Johns from McPherson and Jacobson.
Good evening, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be with you today. I understand it hasn't stopped snowing since the last time I was in Missoula. Please keep it there if you don't mind. We had 51 degrees today in Nebraska, so I know that's about to change. So we're well underway with the search. As of today, I just checked about 10 minutes ago, we have 11 applicants. We anticipate that there'll be more. And certainly we're in that process right now of getting the word out and trying to get people's interest in it. We are scheduled to present finalists to you, or our recommendation for finalists based on criteria on the 24th, and the week of the 30th for the interviews. And then hopefully that first week, second week in February, you're ready to make a decision. So we'll keep you posted on the applicant pool. There are quite a few openings in this part of the country, in your part of the country, and seem to be more and more openings almost every day. It's just been a tough time for superintendents and boards post-election, but we feel pretty good about Missoula's opportunities, primarily because you're out in front of the vast majority of searches that are just now getting underway. I want to remind you that if you will, we'd like you to turn in to Tracy 3 questions, interview questions that you would like to ask when we come back on the 24th to present semifinalists. We would like to bring formatted version of those questions so that we can work you through those. And don't worry about them being grammatically correct or even consistent. What we're going to do is we'll wordsmith them. We'll make sure that we put them in good order. They'll be legal, and we'll be ready then to work with you on those. So the holidays are going to be upon us quickly, and then shortly after that, we're going to start our vetting work right after the 10th when applications close. So we'll have a good handle on the 10th what the talent pool looks like. And we'll be more than happy to provide any kind of an update there or shortly thereafter. So questions on anything that I've said, because the lion's share of the work today is Shar is going to share with you what her and Rob Clark discovered with after 2 or 3 pretty intense days in Missoula and engaging an awful lot of stakeholders. But before I turn it over to Shar, are there any questions from the board that you'd like to ask?
I'll open up the floor for questions from any trustees. Seeing none, go ahead and move on to Shar.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much. First of all, I just want to thank you for having Rob and I in district for for 2 solid days. It was intense and really a lot of fun. And I want to thank Tracy Long because she had us scheduled and she provided sustenance all day and things went really smoothly, I think. So we enjoyed the day and we talked to a lot of people. I was really pleased with the turnout. We ended up talking to 27 separate stakeholder groups. And so I have an executive summary for you tonight. And know that the survey that is out there, the Survey Monkey, is still being compiled, and our home office is creating a full report of that for you as well. So that will all be a part of everything that you're able to see moving forward. So Rob and I came in, we were in separate facilities, working separately so that we were simultaneously at different meetings, and we talked to student groups and your staff, teachers, admin, parents, community forums, all the way down the line. And we asked each one of them 3 different questions. And so I'll go over those for you tonight. The first question we asked every group was to tell us about the good things about the district. And we actually explained to every group that these questions we use, it helps us in our vetting. It also helps you in understanding what the community wants and also helps to formulate your interview questions. So the answers and the things that we got from the survey all combined for that. So tell us about the good things about your district. Well, amazing community support. We heard that over and over again for public education in Missoula. That was evidenced by the bonds and levies that have been passed. There's tremendous partnerships between businesses and nonprofits, local art programs, the University of Montana and Missoula College, wraparound services, a lot of partnerships and support for education across the board. Really is a community that supports their schools. One of the strengths is the diversity that we find in Missoula, a diversity of opportunity, a diversity of and then also political and economic and cultural diversity that lends itself to such a rich environment in Missoula. The schools are highly valued and the staff is so respected. People just love the schools, and we just heard over and over of the connectedness and the feeling of community and how they feel like they are supported in the schools by the teachers, by the staff. And that we heard that from parents, and we heard that from community members, and we heard that from students. So that was really wonderful to hear, especially from the student groups. I enjoyed talking to them. Definitely a sense of connectedness and community among all groups, and a lot of pride in the programmatic offerings that Missoula offers in arts, language, athletics, career tech, your ag programs, a lot of pride all the way around in all of the programs that are being offered there. So a lot of great things that they told us. The second question we asked were to tell us the challenges that the new superintendent should be aware of coming in. And so some of the things that we heard continually is that, Missoula is growing like so many of the communities in Montana, a lot of people moving in. There's a growing number of refugees, a growing homeless population. There are growing mental health needs. And there was a great concern that the mental health and school safety funding that was prioritized through the ESSER funding would be severely impacted in the budget when those funds sunset. And so we heard that quite often, and there was a lot of pride and support that the district has put priorities with mental health for both staff and students, and they're really hoping to see that continue. There's been a dramatic increase in the special ed population over the last year, over 180 students alone. Of course, across Montana, and I think nationwide, a housing crisis and the need for affordable housing. And all of those things lead to staffing shortages. So staffing with teachers, staffing with administrators, permanent staff, a lot in special ed, in our paras, and also in the substitute pool. So that all of that is kind of impacting the services that our students are getting and also staff morale. So I think we see that across Montana, absolutely, and nationwide. There is a need for continuity and consistency among the school sites, and that was regarding the messaging, regarding support, and regarding the different programs that are offered. And so they're wanting to see a little bit more consistency, but they also want to be able to respect the balance and autonomy of each school site and be able to look at the individual needs of each school. This was most evident when I traveled to Sealy and talked to the students and staff, parent at Sealy High School. And because of their geographical separation, I think that creates a feeling that they're often overlooked and ignored and that consistency isn't there. So I heard that a great deal from them. Then the third question was the characteristics or traits that you would like to see in a new superintendent. And once again, we heard basically a lot of the same things over and over. They need somebody that is visible, collaborative, decisive, and I actually heard the term brutally honest. They want somebody that will come in and be an active listener, who will listen to all of the stakeholders, who will take time to learn about the district, who will take time to learn about the history of what has worked and what hasn't worked before jumping in and making decisions, but then to be able to make to process all of that information and make informed and thoughtful decisions. And they realize that some of those decisions will be tough and they're not going to please everyone, but they want somebody that would be able to navigate that. They're looking for somebody with a breadth of experience in the classroom and instructional strategies, but also to be business savvy and to have the ability to create effective and efficient procedures and operations within the district, and to have an understanding, a complete understanding of Montana funding and budgets, as they feel like there's going to, it's already impacted, and they feel like there's going to be a tremendous impact with the end of ESSER funding. They're looking for somebody who's experienced, willing to engage and commit to the community and commit to longevity. And I think we heard that from you as well when we were with you. Somebody that's tough and resilient and proactive, forward thinking, and really ready to come in and take on all of the social, political, and financial challenges that are going to be facing the district coming out of a pandemic. So we heard a lot of those same things throughout each of the groups. I didn't hear anything that was kind of outlying that I didn't hear from most everybody. And it was just a really informative and fun and exciting day for Rob and I. So do you have any questions for me about what we heard?
I'll go ahead and open the floor for questions from any trustee. Trustee Decker.
Hi, thanks for this recap. I've been really eager to hear what folks were saying in the forums. I'm curious, a question that I was going to have and you just answered was if there were any kind of outlying opinions, things that you didn't hear in every forum, but perhaps from certain populations. You did speak to what Sealy had said. I guess, so my question then would be, what of all of these characteristics, what of all of this kind of picture would you say is unique to Missoula? Like, what are the things that don't come up every time you do community forums like this about a superintendent? Because I can imagine that some of these things are fairly universal among what people would hope to see in a superintendent. So what out of this set of things really stands out as kind of Missoula unique or Missoula specific?
Honestly, I think for me, the thing that I heard the most that was Missoula specific is just the culture of Missoula. And I actually heard one group, I think it was with our political leaders who, people embrace Missoula. And of course, it's a very diverse community, politically and culturally, but there's also this sense of community and, like the Keep Missoula Weird kind of bumper stickers that are out there. And so I think people are really proud of that. I hate to say weirdness, but they promote that, and people are really proud of that diversity and of the unique things that Missoula offers. I think that's unique among stakeholders here. I'm not sure if that answered your question.
Vice Chair Walker-Andrews?
Oh, this was just a follow-up. So you think that that's part of the need or the desire for someone to be committed to Missoula, that the person appreciates Missoula as a special place to live?
So I'm sorry, I'm not sure I'm understanding that.
So it was just, I'm following up what you said about people thinking that Missoula was a good place to live, and I was wondering if the commitment that they want to see from someone coming in is tied up in that particular part.
Yes, they want somebody to come in and commit to the community, commit to working with not only the stakeholders, but local businesses, local nonprofits, the wraparound services, the political leaders, the people that, university leaders, people that all have partnerships within the district. And so they want somebody that will be an advocate for the district out there, but also be a part of the community and really nurture those partnerships within the community.
Any other questions from trustees? Trustee Decker?
Thanks. I know that this may be a challenging question to answer in some way, and I also know that we do our best to try to make sure that we have engaged a diverse set of stakeholders. But when you think about diversity from all of what diversity means, age, geography, political persuasion, race, gender identity, everything else, do you feel that we had a diverse group of folks represented in these stakeholder meetings? Were there populations or perspectives that we didn't quite capture?
Not in my mind. I think we had, I heard the word diversity in every group that I spoke to, but some of them, they spoke to their specific diversities or specific concerns on diversity. And they spoke of diversity being a good thing and also being a challenge in Missoula that the new superintendent may need to address to be able to navigate all of those things. There was a good population across the board. I know politically, of course, we had a lot of nonprofits that were there and social groups, and so they also had a very diverse for different, both cultural and lifestyle opportunities there. So I think we had a really good group. And then of course, the community forum was open, and I wasn't in the forum in Missoula. I was in Sealy, but I understand that there was a really nice turnout there as well of a lot of diverse and different people with questions. And
do Trustee Vogel or Vice Chair Hobbins have any questions? They are online.
No, I don't. Thank you. I don't either. Thank you.
Trustee Witcher?
That survey link, was that sent out to every MCPS parent? Yes. So that did go out to everyone?
No, it was, well, Shar, maybe you know the answer to that. I think we had it up on the Missoula website for access, we made mention of it to the groups. If they knew of anybody that wasn't able to make these meetings, they could fill out the survey. We don't have the numbers yet, but we typically get fairly good representation through the survey.
I believe it did go out on Blackboard.
Okay.
So it went out 3 times on Blackboard.
Okay.
So
Thank
you
you.
have to check the notification for email, text, or any of that when you set up Blackboard. Any other questions from trustees? Any final thoughts, Shar or Steve?
I don't think so. Talking to the groups, and one group specifically kind of stood out to me a little because there were parents in the group, and they said, we know we have this wish list a mile long, and we know that we're not ever going to be able to fulfill the needs that everybody wants. But they also just appreciated the fact that, that they had the opportunity to speak. And somebody said to me, sometimes it's not what we want, but what we need. And so I wasn't quite sure where to go with that, but it feels like all of the comments that they made talks about the kinds of things that might be needed as far as being an educational leader, but also a business leader and a public advocate.
The only other thing I would add is that take great pride in the fact that your stakeholder constituents care. And the turnout is on the upper end of the turnouts that we get on these searches. Quite often we experience apathy on the part of people. We didn't have that with your folks. And a great deal of the credit goes to Tracy Long, who tirelessly put together one heck of a schedule. So we were able to interact with a lot of folks. But you've got something special. It is you are unique. And now what we need to do is try to find the right fits for you to give you a chance to talk about what the future of education looks like for your students, community, and parents. So and staff. So that's what we're going to do next. So let's have a happy holiday, everyone. And if any other questions come up, please get in touch with us.
Yep, Trustee Witcher.
Am I allowed to ask how many applicants we currently have?
11. All right.
Yeah.
Well,
And so, again, remember what I said when I was there last time. The quality we're going to get a lot of applicants initially, and then we're going to get, because we'll have a lot of conversations over the holidays with folks, if we can convert them into applicants, what typically happens is we get a large number of applications that come in 24, 48 hours before the deadline. I can't explain it. I don't know why that is. It just is. It's the industry norm.
all right.
I also anticipate, and maybe you can correct me on this, Steve, but I saw a lot of applications come in over that Thanksgiving weekend. And now with the Christmas break holidays coming up, people have time to sit and think about that and really work on their application and put it in. So I'm anticipating that over the holidays, we're going to have a lot more come in.
All right. Thank you both for your presentation.
Okay, good luck. Have a great meeting tonight. Happy holidays, everyone.
Yep, thank you. And
Bye.
finally, for item number 4, is there any public comment for this agenda item?
Hello. Okay. Hi, my name's Sienna Solberg, and I'm the Executive Director of Spark Arts Ignite Learning. Do you need me to spell my name? You got it. Thanks, Tracy. First, I just wanted to say thank you so much for your work in finding a superintendent that aligns with Missoula's values and for providing space for community voice and input. Nearly 10 years ago, Missoula was chosen by the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts as a site for their Ensuring the Arts for Any Given Child initiative, known in Missoula as Spark Arts Ignite Learning. As a collective impact with many voices at the table, including multiple representatives from Missoula County Public Schools, our initiative has thrived and grown. We serve all K-8 MCPS students, and we are a model for the state. I'm beginning to get recognition across the country as a rich arts education district and community. Much of our success can be attributed to the support and investment from the district, led by you all and the superintendent. We are so grateful for Russ Lodge's commitment to arts education and his predecessors. And we so look forward to working with the new superintendent to continue moving our work forward to ensure equitable access to the arts for our Missoula's youth. Thank you so much.
Hello, my name is Rebecca Naskovitz, and my name is spelled R-E-B-E-C-C-A, last name N-A-S-G-O-V-I-T-Z. I am a parent of 2 children that are at Missoula County Public Schools right now. One is at Washington Middle School, and one of them is at Hellgate High School. And I am here, first of all, to thank you for your support of arts education in our schools. I'm so grateful that our schools are a reflection of the vibrant arts-rich community that they serve. The relationship that MCPS has with community arts organizations and the University of Montana is truly special. At the community stakeholders meeting that I attended, there are a number of different priorities voiced. To name a few: equity, holistic child, differentiated learning, mental health, academic goals. Arts education supports all of these, along with critical thinking, creative processing, and Spark Arts programming is unique in that it engages every child, K through 8. I'm so excited about the high level of buy-in around arts education at MCPS right now, from principals, classroom teachers, administrators. It feels really exciting and unprecedented. I just hope that our new superintendent will sustain that momentum. Thank you.
Any other public comment on item 4, superintendent search update? Seeing none, the time is 5:58 and the special work session meeting will adjourn. Regular work board session will start shortly.
Recording in progress.
We'll begin shortly. All right, the time is now 6:05, and we'll go ahead and start the regular school board meeting for the Missoula County Public Schools Board of Trustees. Roll call has been taken, and now we'll move on to item number 2, which is the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, thank you for understanding the 5-minute break. We had a work session before this. So now we'll move on to item number 3, review, revise, and approve the agenda. Any trustee who wants to move or remove an agenda item, please let me know now. I don't see any, and I don't see the trustees online. Okay. None of them have their hand raised. I'm unable to see them on the screen. Okay. I don't see any, so I will take a motion to approve tonight's agenda. Moved by Vice Chair Walker Andrews, second by Trustee F. Garris. Any public comment on the agenda item only? Seeing none, all trustees in favor for approving tonight's agenda, please indicate yes by raising your hand. Unanimous to all trustees present. Trustee Hobbins? Oh, I see your hand. All right, now we'll move on to item number 4, approve minutes from the regular school board meeting of November 15, 2022. I'll take a motion from any trustee. Moved by Trustee F. Garris. Second by Trustee Decker. Any trustee comments on the minutes? Seeing none. Any public comment on the minutes? Seeing none. All trustees in favor of approving the minutes, please indicate yes by raising your hand. Unanimous to all trustees present. Trustee Hobbins? Yes, okay. Moving on to item number 5, which is public comment. Public comment portion of the meeting is set aside for the public to address the board as a body. It is not a time for board response or for the public to ask questions. Do not infringe on the right to privacy of others. Please sign in and spell your first and last name. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per speaker. The chair may interrupt or terminate an individual speaker if the statements are out of order, are over 3 minutes, or personally directed to an individual. Any public comment?
We do have public comment tonight. First up is Daisy Beetle.
My name is Daisy Beetle, and I am a sophomore at the Missoula Online Academy. I've been a part of Missoula County Public Schools since kindergarten, and I have enjoyed school for the most part the entire time. As we all know, high school can be a challenging transition for some students. I switched to MOA on October 10th of this year. However, my first experience was when COVID-19 shut down all of the schools. It was nice to have a familiar platform and a few familiar faces when I rejoined. I switched to MOA because the perpetrator of an assault I endured was attending the same site school. I felt as though it was impossible to keep us 1,500 feet apart as stated in the order of protection.
Please, out of order. Please skip that part and continue with positive thoughts.
Okay, well, I don't.
Our next public commenter is Christine Kolzak.
I think Mr. Rott might be doing the same thing.
The red, okay, great. My name is Christine Kolzak, Christinekolczak. Whew, good evening. I was here last month. I'm currently the TOSA and the counselor at the MOA, and I spent last month giving you a few minutes introducing you to our program. Today, I'd like to talk about our students. Almost 50% of our students have an IEP or a 504, and nearly 75% of our students meet the criteria for multi-tiered systems of support. So they have some sort of intervention that helps them be successful in the school system. We're in our 3rd year this year. We're redefining our model of service. So our program is synchronous, which means it's real time. So if you think about when your student gets up in the morning and goes to class and has to be at high school by 8:55, our students have to be online and logged in by 8:55. And their teachers meet them at the door, just like your students are met at the door. And our teachers provide the same sort of greetings and welcome. They provide the exact same curriculum that your students are receiving in your schools. Our English teachers are teaching Carnegie. Our math teachers are using Mathia, Desmos. All those things should be second nature to your ear. However, our students struggle with homelessness, mental health issues, health issues. They're pregnant, they're parenting, they're gifted, they're talented, they're heading to college in January and graduating early. A number of our students share time. So basically what that means is they may spend the morning with us doing government, English, financial algebra. Then during the lunchtime, they transition over to Hellgate and they take 2 art classes and maybe a welding class. It's a really good model to share students. Moving forward, I would really like that to be our focus, to whenever possible be working in a tandem system where we have that ability for students to have both kinds of support. We teach almost 80 kids on a shoestring. Remember that we have 80 and Sealy has 98, and 3 of those are ours. We have no building, no buses, no lunches, and very few expenses. We have 4.5 teachers, a para, and me. And we're doing amazing work. Our kids are learning. They're learning at the same level and at the same expertise that all of the students in the site schools are doing. They're meeting those expectations. When you read about students who are online and they've not done very well across the nation, I challenge you to really look at our program as a model. There are other programs in the country. We're continuing to grow and build and modify our program. And I think that that's really important as we look forward to funding issues, that we take a look at our program and see what we can do to keep it in line with being a budget item for MCPS.
Our next public comment is from Nick Kujawa.
Thank you. My name is Nick Kujawa, Nickkujawa, and I'm the parent of an 8th grader and a sophomore. I'm here to strongly urge you to keep your current late high school start time for these reasons. It's our high school teenagers whose circadian rhythm is most affected by puberty. It is most cost effective for the school district, and it preserves optionality for sports and extracurriculars. There was some confusion during last month's board work session as to why the recommendation for a later start date was made just for high schools. The reason is that the shift in circadian rhythm in adolescence is due to the onset of puberty, which in the United States is typically around 12.5 to 13.5 years old. So even though they use the term adolescence in the white paper, we're really just talking about teenagers here. In addition, the 2-hour phase shift in sleep-wake times does not occur all at once. It actually climbs steadily over the 5 years following the start of puberty. So it's really hitting you at 17 and 18 for these kids. So yes, middle school starting at 7:50 can be very difficult for an 8th grader versus when they were in the 6th or 7th grade, but it's only going to get harder and harder for them to wake up as they progress through high school. Regarding the cost of buses and bus routes, I just want to reemphasize what Superintendent Lodge noted, which is that Beach had to run 58 buses for the historic schedule, but was able to drop it to 54 buses for the current schedule. Each bus costs $55,000 a run at minimum, so by dropping those 4 buses, MCPS is enjoying an annual savings of at least $220,000. All of the alternatives had significantly more routes than the current schedule, so not only is the current schedule better for our high school students from a sleeping perspective, but it's also better for MCPS from a monetary perspective. Finally, regarding activities before official start times, there were a few comments made to the effect that what is the point of having a later start time if kids have practice or take a class in the morning before school starts? Please don't forget that those activities are optional, while attendance at school during the official hours of instruction is mandatory. Your student may want to get their driver's license early and thus choose to take a 0-period driver's ed class, and that's fine if that works for your family, but it's very different than the school district requiring all high school students to wake up early and be in classrooms at 7:50 in the morning. Further, as you look at some of the sports practices as you're reviewing this, please keep in mind that some early practices like swimming or dance are driven by the availability of facilities such as Grizz Pool at the U of M and have nothing to do with high school start times. Even on the historic schedule, with high school starting at 7:50, for example, swimmers had to get up very early and still practice before school hours. And that was totally based on availability at Grizz Pool. Finally, with regard to later schedules for practice after school, please remember that many of our coaches, especially for the JV and Froshmore teams, are community members who are volunteering their time. And for them to leave work, a half hour before 5 o'clock to get to a practice at 4:30 is actually much easier than leaving work an hour and a half early to start coaching at 3:30. Thank you for your time and consideration, and please retain the current schedule for our high schoolers. Thank you.
Ms. Beadle?
I'm Daisy's mom, Shannon, S-H-A-N-N-O-N, and I'm just going to read the letter to you guys on behalf of Daisy. I can assure you it's anonymous. There won't be any names or negative thoughts. So Daisy's grades at her site school were barely passing, and she was very much struggling to make it to class every day. She was in 7th grade when COVID started, went through middle school and high school thus far as a real combination. She now attends the MOA. She has high A's in all of her classes, and her attendance has improved majorly. She has not only noticed a change in her attitude, but a change in her overall mental health. She has found an amazing support group in the teachers and the staff at MOA. It would be very disappointing to lose these amazing support people for her and other students that attend the MOA. She says, I feel because MOA has fewer kids than an in-person high school, and all the kids and staff have become a real small family. MOA has helped her and changed her life in the better for so many ways. Not being able to have the MOA program next year would be devastating, as I know me and many other students have found comfort and support in the family that MOA provides. She's begging you to consider her story, knowing there are many others just like hers when deciding if MOA should be an option for students next year or not, as the task of switching to an in-person school for these kids for their last 2 years of high school is not only unnecessary, but also detrimental to a lot of them's mental health. Thank you.
Any more public comment?
Daisy, thank you for writing that. We appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Seeing no other public comment, we'll move on to item 6, which is our community connection. And I do want to note that we did receive written correspondence that we did review. So the community connection is Jeremy Drake from Strategy Zero Waste Solutions. And I'll go ahead and turn the mic over to you.
Thank you. Good evening, Superintendent Lodge, trustees, MCPS staff. My name is Jeremy Drake. I really appreciate you giving the time tonight to me to talk to you about the wonderful work that we've been able to do around zero waste across the district. Next slide, please. So this says agenda. It's really the outline for the presentation. So just going to give you a brief history of zero waste at MCPS, talk a little bit about the program expansion that took place this past year, and then give you some ideas about the keys to success for these programs that we've discovered, and then talk a little bit about what's next. So in early 2016, Missoula City Council adopted a zero waste resolution, setting a goal and launching the initiative known as 0 by 50. That same week, Home Resource launched the Zero Waste Ambassadors Program, ZWAP for short. It's the 5th grade education program that's been at many of the MCPS elementary schools. Next slide. Soon thereafter, former Mayor Engen, and he asked former Superintendent Thane to adopt the goal for the district. Next slide. And we began working on 0 by 50 plan for the city, And once we had the framework for 0 by 50, we used that to guide a planning process for MCPS Zero Waste Plan. And the district Zero Waste Plan has become a template for the schools, where each school has its own individualized plan. They share many of the same components. In 2019, we launched the district's first zero waste pilot school at Jeanette Rankin Elementary. And we learned quickly that the cafeteria really is ground zero for waste in elementary schools. Next slide. So last year, we expanded zero waste programs to 4 more elementary schools and the central kitchen. And I want to note that what you're about to see in these next slides would not have been possible without the leadership of the school principals, the commitment of the custodians, and the engagement of the entire school community. So let's take a look at some of the results of these collaborative efforts. So here we're seeing what implementation of recycling and composting looks like in the central kitchen on the left and in the center, and on the right in school kitchens. Next slide. And kitchens lead us to cafeterias. So here we are. That's one of the elementary school cafeterias. That's how typically they manage the leftovers at lunch. And last year we introduced a 5-sort approach. So first step is liquids. Next slide. That was the liquids bucket. The next step is recycling. So we're recycling milk and juice cartons, and then we're capturing edible food for reuse to be served again. And then finally, we're also collecting compostable food scraps and paper. The results, and this is what's left over at the end. This is the quote-unquote garbage. It's mostly plastic film, ketchup packets, plastic utensils. Next slide. So it looks slightly different at each school, but all schools have this 5-sort approach. You can see it kind of lined up there. And what the result is, next slide, is a 95% reduction by weight of waste from the cafeteria and a 90% reduction by volume. Next slide. So outside of the cafeteria, we have expanded access to recycling with new signage and containers, like here in a hallway. Next slide. And then here in staff workrooms and also in staff kitchens. And then some schools are now composting paper towels in restrooms, both adult restrooms and student restrooms. And here I want to highlight a program that started at Paxton Elementary this fall. Custodian Craig Moore, he's a real champion of Paxton's Zero Waste program. And when the Breakfast in the Classroom program rolled out, he decided that he wanted to see what was happening in the cafeteria happen in all the classrooms. So he put it together, trained all the teachers. I visited Paxton last week to get some photos, and talked to a couple of teachers who were raving about it. They say it's working really great for their classrooms. Next slide, please. So now we should talk about collection. So part of a zero waste program means that we have to optimize what's going on behind the school too. Earlier I talked about statistics from the cafeteria, including volume reduction of 90%. And that's really important. It's a key metric necessary when we're optimizing our collection services to meet the needs of the school. So here's Russell School. In that wooden corral, they had a garbage dumpster, and then they had that recycling dumpster that you can see. They had 5 days a week of garbage service and every other week recycling service. Next slide. So they switched to landfill service 2 days out of the week, weekly recycling with a dumpster and 2 carts, every other week cardboard collection separate from the other recyclables, and then weekly composting in those 4 blue carts. Next slide. So you can see creeping out of the top there, we've got milk and juice cartons making up a big part of what's being recycled right now. Next slide. And food scraps and paper towels are being diverted at a rate of about 50 pounds per day per school. So the punchline here is that the cost went up about $50 per month, while diversion more than quadrupled. Okay, next slide. So keys to success. Let's talk now about what that looks like. So first up, leadership is at the top of the list, and that's principals at the elementary schools. Here's Chris Stevens from Jeanette Rankin Elementary receiving her Trailblazer of the Year Award in 2019 from Home Resource. She said, "It's a lot of work. You have to be committed and you have to have buy-in." She said, you need a leader leading the way, and then the kids will follow along. Next slide. Here's Craig Moore, Paxson. He's an example of a custodian who's taken leadership to ensure the success of the Zero Waste program at his school. Just about every school we've been working with has one. Dan Faldorf at Russell, Chris Moss, Nick Holsworth at Chief Charlo, to name a few. Staff and students have also stepped up into leadership roles. Here's the 4th grade service club at Lewis and Clark Elementary, a couple of the students from that club helping little ones navigate through the sorting line at lunch. And they're led by behavior interventionist Brandy Gillespie, who's also pictured there. So next is staff buy-in, particularly custodial staff. It's really important. Food service staff as well. Custodians are where the rubber meets the road with this kind of stuff. It's critical for them to understand how the program works and to adopt best practices like the rinsing out of the liquid bucket, for example. I want to pause for a second and say that some custodians have mentioned that these programs take up to 30 minutes more per day, adding to their daily tasks. That highlights the importance of each school developing the social infrastructure to support these programs, the student helpers, staff, PTA, community volunteers. As these programs continue to expand, I think it's important to keep track of how that load is carried and to ensure that these programs are viewed as collective community efforts at each school, and so that the burden of this good work is shared as much as possible. Next slide. And that as efficiencies are discovered, like Craig here with his stacked bin, those can be shared across the district as well to other schools. And next slide. This innovative solution like Dan Faldorf did at Russell, where he attached a bag to collect paper towels for compost apart from garbage. Next slide. So food service staff, also important, gatekeepers for food rescue. There's a sanitizing protocol that's been adopted through the central kitchen. Next slide. Keys to success, education is next. Schools are provided with an in-class sorting activity based on the 5-sort system I told you about. Promotional materials like scripts for morning announcements, blurbs for PTA newsletters, and presentations with principals during the first week of launch take advantage of captive audience to train students in the cafeterias. Next slide. And then here we have Zero Waste cafeteria coaches who help students through the sort line. That's a key to the program's success and to build that culture as we go. Next slide. Wrapping up here, partnerships are critical. We've got really great stories like this in-district partnership with the Sentinel Industrial Arts class. They fabricated 3 sorting carts last year. Next slide, please. That's what one of them looks like, part of the set of CAD drawings, next slide, that a student developed so that this year we can replicate those carts. Next slide. Community partnerships, also very essential. Mission-aligned organizations like Home Resource and Missoula Aging Services played a big role so far. Home Resource continues to be a key partner in Zero Waste for MCPS. In fact, Kelly Hess, the new director of Home Resource, told me last week that all 3 of her kids went through ZWAP when they were in 5th grade, and it changed their family's life. So, great testimonial there. And now the district has on its volunteer portal opportunities for community members to sign up as Zero Waste cafeteria coaches. Next slide. So wrapping up, what's next? We're working with 4 schools with plans to launch the new programs in April. Zero Waste planning team meetings have taken place at Hawthorne and Lowell. Rattlesnake's coming up next week. Lots of enthusiasm. Over the next several months, we're going to be working with Franklin and Jeanette Rankin Elementary. They both have programs going on. We're going to make sure that all the elements of their programs are optimized. Next slide. And we're also eyeing some opportunities to take the zero waste programs to the next level. One opportunity is to shift elementary school cafeterias away from single-use plastic utensils and toward reusables, in this case, stainless steel sporks. So there's a donor lined up who's willing to provide all the sporks that the elementary schools could possibly need as soon as MCPS is ready to start using them. Next slide. And also funding opportunities. The district has already submitted a grant application to the Carton Council, and we'll be meeting this week to discuss funding of opportunities available to support recycling and zero waste programs through the new bipartisan infrastructure law through the EPA. And that's it for me. Thank you so much for your time. I'd love the opportunity to answer any questions you may have about the district's zero waste program.
All right, we'll open the floor for trustee questions. Trustee Witcher?
Thank you so much. I think this is a really amazing partnership with MCPS. What is the holdup in the spork
Yeah, the sport.
pushing? Tell me more about that and what needs to go through the district to make sporks happen.
So with the elementary school food service, it's all through the central kitchen. And so the reusable trays are already part of the picture. Sometimes they're there, sometimes they're not. Part of the holdup is reliability of the dishwasher. And this is what I've heard from Stacy Rossmiller, food service director. And another is trucks. They've been down a truck for a while. She's concerned about having extra crates on trucks filled with sporks that they've washed. They're adding to the drayage. She's concerned that that's too much for what they have available now for their staff capacity.
I do believe we approved a truck last
Terrific.
meeting.
One down.
Yeah.
Meg, the dishwasher's 200 grand, so that'll be the next conversation.
Yeah.
Volunteers?
That's part of the dishwasher could be part of the grant discussion that we're having this week.
Any other trustee questions? Trustee Decker?
More of a comment. I think I might be one of the only people who was actually at a couple, at least, of those planning meetings when this got started. And as someone who, like, in my day job, I work in systems change, I am over here just, like, worshiping at the altar of what this is. I'm so blown away at the moving from vision to operation at such a fine-grained kind of a level, and the consistency of vision that it takes to make something like this happen in a district as large as ours with as many moving parts and different people in roles. I mean, it's truly so impressive. And I know it's like just the beginning in so many ways of where we want to go. But I just really want to give all the admiration and credit to folks who've worked every single day to get us here.
Thank you. I'll just say that so much of this is the school teams being ready for it, and just, it makes sense. And folks want to know that it's the right thing to do, and they want to do it, so they put the time in. The kids, it's a no-brainer for the kids. I want to share that at the Hawthorne meeting this past week, there was a community member from Turner Family Farms who was there because he wanted the food scraps for the chickens and the pigs at the farm. How cool is that, right? So a lot of interest community-wide in having these programs succeed.
Any questions from the trustees online? All right, any other final questions? Seeing none, thank you so much for your presentation. All right, now we'll move on to item number 7, reports and announcements. And the first up will be our student trustee reports. And we'll start with Big Sky High School in PAC.
Hello, my name is Sinpaxine Morjo. Everyone can call me Pak. I'm representing Big Sky High School. And last week, we ended the fall season with a celebratory prep assembly and started off with our Big Sky winter sports. Last week, wrestling, our girls took 4th place in Flathead with 4 individuals also placing. Basketball, boys and girls traveled to Billings. sweeping Billings Senior. Swimming, Big Sky sent 8 swimmers to Kalispell, and girls took 4th, where the boys took 9th. Also, our speech and debate team traveled to Kalispell for regionals. 7 Big Sky students placed in their event, and our team placed 4th overall. School-wide, our programs have taken initiative to help local communities, including Key Club and National Honor Society, by teaming up with the Salvation Army and Hawthorne Elementary. Student government is hosting a 3-day Spirit Week next week, which will be giving away free hot chocolate and candy canes for students coming into the building. Big Sky's families have filled over 50 requests for giving tree requests to make sure students have a good holiday season over break. Our FRC is giving away 25 breakfast meal kits to Big Sky families. The meal kits include sausage from our schoolhouse meats. And finally, our Health Science Academy seniors have started their biomedical innovations project that will look to solve in their community or investigate a scientific relationship that allows them to carry out their own experiments. Thank you.
All right, now we'll move on to Jesse at Sentinel High School.
All right, good evening. My name is Jesse. I'll be talking about Sentinel. So winter sports are off to a great start. This competition season has begun. Swimming had their first meet in Kalispell this weekend and will compete again in Missoula this Saturday. Wrestling had their first meet this last weekend and performed great, and particularly exciting for the wrestling program is the addition of a female division where Sentinel has 3 wrestlers this year. There's a selection of 3 female-only wrestling tournaments this season. Basketball recently competed in Billings, and the boys will be playing tonight against CMR right here, while the girls' next home game is against Belgrade on the 20th. Cheerleaders and dancers are beginning their performances as well, where they will be a staple at most of Sentinel's basketball games, along with the Sentinel Pep Band. Sentinel is also looking for live performers to sing or play the national anthem during home games. Additionally, student government is sponsoring the Spartiest Student Award, where they will choose 1 student per game as the loudest, proudest, and most positive. A variety of prizes will be available during the season for this award, and Student Gov hopes to build school spirit, sense of community, and sportsmanship. Speech and debate is continuing its successful season with recent tournaments occurring in Helena at Carroll College and this past weekend in Kalispell at Glacier High School. The club is planning a showcase for this Thursday from 6 to 8, where they will offer abbreviated versions of many different events to allow family and friends a chance to see their performances. In line with other debate events, Sentinel had a successful showing at the Model United Nations Conference, where Team Japan won Outstanding Delegation Award, given to the top 5% of teams in attendance. Amnesty International is beginning their annual Right for Rights campaign to promote International Human Rights Day, which is on December 10th every year. Through this program, students within the club help educate classes on the work that Amnesty does, and then lead them in writing their own letters to help address human rights abuses around the world. The newly founded German club will be hosting an informational cultural event at lunch this Friday in order to spur interest in the German language and culture and recruit members for meetings beginning in January. For the first time, HOSA has updated their requirements to allow members to letter in the club, offering more opportunities, and the robotics club recently had 7 students complete their OSHA 10 training and certification, which are valid for acquiring jobs after graduation. Fireside, the school dance held on December 2nd, was a great night for the Sentinel community as well, and hundreds of dollars were raised by student government through this event. Sentinel looks forward to what's coming in the new year. Thank you.
All right, thank you both for being here tonight and reading your reports, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Lodge for the other schools that are not present.
Tracy, do we have anybody online? No. Okay. This is Hellgate's report tonight. The community outreach, the clubs at Hellgate are trying to serve those in need with the Hellgate community and beyond their walls. So in the last 2 months, the following fundraisers have taken place. In the government classes, there's been a raffle. Community donations have raised over $900 that go straight to Hellgate families in need. The Indigenous Student Union is fundraising for winter clothing and supplies. Members of the National Honor Society are collecting toys for tots. Members of NHS are also collecting feminine hygiene products for the Poverello Center, the YWCA, Missoula Food Bank, the FRC, and Soft Landings from November 1st to the 18th. The Model United Nations statewide competition of the 5 winners, 3 of them were from Hellgate. All Northwest is an elite competition for music students within the Northwest. 4 Hellgate orchestra students were chosen to attend, as well as the entire Hellgate Chevalier Choir. It's an exciting time to embrace tradition, community, and fun. At Hellgate, in addition to sales of hot cocoa, cider, and candy, cane sleighs, there will be an ugly United States Day next Tuesday, where teachers compete for the honor of the most hideous holiday outfit, followed by a choir and orchestra concert the next day. Traditionally, staff wear formal attire to honor the performance of the students. Everyone is excited to bring back this tradition after a few years of COVID cancellations. Next is Sealy. Both the boys and girls basketball teams have started off undefeated in the regular season this year. They look forward to keeping their undefeated records deep into the season. Student government is putting on a school-wide clothing and toy drive. They have also partnered with the Red Cross to host a blood drive on the 14th of December. The LEOs have been inactive in the month of December, so they don't compete with other organizations for funds during the holidays. All students are excited for winter break and some time off, and many SSH students are taking advantage of the snow and cold weather. Snowmobiling and ice fishing are in full swing in Sealy. And for Willard, as we get ready to celebrate the holidays, things at Willard are going well. Next week, we will celebrate the winter solstice. We'll have a community holiday meal and smudging led by Melissa Hammett. Our flagship program recently hosted a First Friday event that showcased student artwork and cookies made by our culinary program students. Community turnout was great, and multiple staff members provided soup and other items for attendees. We will graduate 23 more students in January. Of these 35 students, approximately 20 students have indicated interest in taking advantage of dual enrollment classes at UM and the Missoula College during the second semester. And that ends our student trustee reports.
All right, item 7B is the Health Insurance Trust Fund report on page 26. There is no oral report. So we'll move on to 7C, which are announcements from the superintendent.
So 2 announcements tonight. One is just how well this is the season for music concerts and orchestras, band, choir, and it has been really well attended across the district and really rewarding and nice to see so many parents in our buildings and so much community support. So this last week, this week, the same, a lot of music activities taking place across the district. The other announcement is February 13th, really a brainchild of Amy and Vinny and Jenna and Barb and Erica. On February 13th, we got a PIR day. So we're gonna host a summit. Just like you were going to Las Vegas for a conference, we are now doing a summit with every employee in the district having some sectional to go to that pertains to their job. Whether they're classified, whether they're certified, whether they work in the kitchen, whether they work on the grounds, custodial, whatever it might be. And I think we're up to 30 different sectionals that are scheduled so far. We've got people coming in from the University of Montana. We've got people coming in from the community to present. This is our first annual summit, educational summit. So if you'd like to come by on February 13th, it's all going to take place at Sentinel, and there might be some overflow into this building as we look for rooms and places to hold these events. Vinny, is there anything I've left out?
No, you did a nice job, Russ.
You just don't want to talk, Vinny, but I don't blame you. There's probably plenty I left out, but there's been a lot of planning, a lot of things going on, and this is really an undertaking, and is well along. Barbara designed an app. We even have an app for people to apply. We're pretty big time, and so we are excited to do this. So February 13th is our first annual MCPS summit, and we've got something for everybody. So that's the plan. More to come on that one for sure.
Would we ever look to let our neighboring schools come, or?
Great question. Yeah, we are going to extend an invite to our partnering districts that feed in, and then also other districts from around our city. And then part of that will be the invitation to the university. We'll reach out to our other AA partners as well to provide that. Now, they may be in school, so they'll have to look at options for themselves, but we'll extend that for sure.
All right, thank you. Now on to item 8, the consent agenda. There is no board discussion for consent agenda items, as these are routine items. Any board member can discuss an agenda item to ask for an agenda item to be moved with a motion and second. Any board members wish to do that? Seeing none, so we'll move on to 8A2, which is the ratify out-of-district attendance agreement. I would need an elementary motion to approve the consent agenda items. Moved by Trustee Witcher, second by Trustee F. Garris. No board discussion. Any public comment on this agenda item? Seeing none, all elementary trustees in favor of approving the consent agenda motion, please indicate yes by raising your hand. Unanimous to all elementary trustees present. 8A2 again is to ratify the out-of-district attendance agreements for our secondary recommendation, our high school. I would take a request from a high school trustee. Moved by Vice Chair Walker Andrews. Second by Trustee F. Garris. No board discussion. Any public comments? Seeing none, all trustees in favor of approving the consent agenda, high school consent agenda, please indicate yes by raising your hand. Unanimous to all trustees present. Moving on to item 9, old business. Back to 8.
Well, I'm just worried, did we do 1 and 2 at the same time, or did we skip 1?
Nope, that's not.
It's all okay?
Yep, we're
Okay.
good. Back to 9, old business information, finance and operations and maintenance, and that is to talk about the bus schedule update. It's information only, and so I'll go ahead and give it back to Mr. Lodge.
Yeah, this is just a short one. Here's my plan. I've met with all the principals, I've met with the union reps, and I basically just asked for feedback. We're really down to what we want to do with one schedule. We've got an early time slot, we've got a middle time slot, and we've got a later time slot. And I would like to make a decision in January and let the public know what we're going to do. But I need a lot of feedback from people, and I need to give them a chance to voice their opinions. So after this meeting tonight, Tracy and I are going to put together basically a few questions that go on the website that we can send out to our entire staff and then to our community. And over the next 3, 4, 5 weeks, I just want to invite feedback. I'd like to hear what people think. It's pretty simple, really. The K-5 kids can fit. How we describe this might be another task, but the K-5 kids can fit in the first time slot or the second one. The middle school kids can fit in all of them, and the high school kids can fit into the first one or the third one. It's really what it's all about. And there's pros and cons to all of it. This is not a win for everybody, but I think it's also a thing where I need to make a decision, and we need to move on and plan our day, our year. But before I do that, I really need to hear from people. So I'm announcing this tonight that we are reaching out to the public and reaching out to the community, our staff, to get back to us, and we'll work that through the district website, and that will be up probably tomorrow. And then we will take input, and then if there's enough input coming back by the 11th, I think that's the next board meeting in January, I could announce it and put it on the agenda that night. If there's more coming and we need another 2 weeks, I would do it in the latter one, the 20th or whatever of January, and then that would be it, and we'd put it to bed and we'd move on. So that's all I really want to share with you tonight is we've got 3 time slots, and we're going to put together which grade band goes in the time slot, and I'd like to hear from everybody who has an opinion on that. And we will start gathering that information and put it to use over the next 3, 4, 5 weeks. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Superintendent Lodge. So this, again, is information only, but are there any questions or comments from any trustees? Trustee Decker.
I'm just curious how it will be. I just want to ask and also suggest that we be very thoughtful about how this be framed to parents, that this is asking for input, but not necessarily taking a vote, for example. Like, we're not necessarily, taking a vote based solely on this input. Also, that folks have some kind of background or context around the vote beyond thinking about simply what's best for your family this year or next year. People's lives change, people's schedules change, and there's a research base behind making these decisions one way and another that I think it's important to reiterate at times, without pushing people too hard in any one direction. But I just would ask if we have put thought, or that we put thought into how we ask this in such a way that makes it clear that this is what it is. It's not in a vacuum, and it's not a vote.
Yeah, I agree, and that's why I just said briefly, the challenge will be to write this up so people understand it, and that's what I want to do. We'll have to work on that a little bit, get some opinions, and have a couple of people review it, and have people read it for the first time without having any background and see how they interpret it, because it's really important that we get the right message out. And so I think the writing of it will be a bit of a challenge, but we got to get that done here the next couple of days so we can get things out on the website to the community.
Trustee Mercer?
So then whenever you got this back and you're ready, are you proposing that to be a board vote or an announcement at a board meeting?
I'm proposing that is an announcement at a board meeting.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none. So now, are there any public comments?
Thank you. My name is Nick Kuyava, N-I-C-K-K-U-J-A-W-A. I think this is great. I appreciate having the 3 tiers. That's saving us $220,000 a year versus having that prior 4-tier schedule, so thank you for that. I am curious if your plan is to have the 3 tiers as they're currently set up, with the, as you were discussing, 25 minutes between tier 1 and tier 2, starting at 7:50, and then I think it's at 8:15, and then the last tier a full hour after that. And I guess what I'm trying to understand is how, obviously I understand that, there's the union and the contract, but how this relates to the prior discussion about making sure that this was kind of a very open discussion and a lot of feedback from parents and teachers, and looking at the data from this first semester that doesn't even end until after your January board meeting versus the 2017 first semester. So I'm just trying to wrap my head around what exactly is going on now versus what was a lot of that discussion at the board work plan meeting on November 15th. Thanks.
So yeah, I'm not supposed to answer you, so give me a call, Nick. We'll talk it through, okay?
Thanks, Russ. I was just going to reread the public comment rules. Any other public comment on agenda item 9A? Seeing none, so we'll move on to 10, new business. Finance, operation, and maintenance. Topic 1 is the technology fund update, and I will turn the floor over to Mr. McHugh.
Thank you. So page 30 has our quarterly report for the tech fund. It's not too remarkable at this point in the year. There are a couple of things to point out. If you look down, the second half of the spreadsheet shows the expenses, and you'll see under the second to last column under encumbered or purchase orders, there's a negative 338,000 under minor equipment. What that represents is a reversal of the expenditure for the year of that 338,000 based upon the fact that expenditure relates to the prior year. So that those funds were encumbered in the prior year and expended this year. So we want to we make that adjustment to make sure we reflect actual expenditures during this fiscal year. So that's why you see a negative. It's something we see in the first quarter, but you won't see it after that once we start showing the second and third quarter. Also, there's salaries and benefits. There's a few IT personnel that we do pay through the tech fund, not many. It amounts to about 160,000 in total, but majority of those salaries are covered through the general fund. Just wanted to point that out. Otherwise, we're looking good. Happy to answer any questions.
Again, this is an information-only item. Any trustee questions or comments? All right, seeing none, any public comments on this agenda item? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 2. Topic is a transportation fund update, and this again is an information-only item. Back to you, Mr. McHugh.
Thank you. So similar to the tech fund, the expenditures will start catching up in the second quarter. So this document doesn't reflect a lot of revenue until we have our November tax collections. It also doesn't reflect a lot of expenditures. And so we'll probably see we will see a significant bump in both of those when we do our second quarter report. Otherwise, not a remarkable report in any real respect. I think I just point out, if you look on the revenue side, we talk a lot about the state and county reimbursement. You can see under that budget column that the total county and state reimbursement is $450,000. So it is not a significant revenue source for our transportation fund budget. And the same is true on the secondary side, where it's $235,000 county and state. Happy to answer any questions.
Any trustee questions or comments? Seeing none, any public comment on this agenda item? Seeing none, we'll move on to 3. The topic is a general fund update, and that this is the information only. And back to Mr. McHugh.
So thank you. This is an early info update on the general fund projections. It follows our October enrollment count, and what we have seen on following the October enrollment count is a decline in our K-8 enrollment and an increase in our high school enrollment. The K-6 enrollment compared to last October is down 24, and our grade 7 and 8 is down 19. We separated between K-6 and 7 and 8 because they have a different A and B amount, so we look at those differently. What you'll see beginning on page 33 is some background information. We're not really looking at projections right now, so I'm just showing this projection type information with comparisons to prior years. So you'll see our main data points for each of those years going back to 2018. You'll see the inflation factor, the A and B K-6, A and B 7, 8, what the calculated max budget was, base budget, and our adopted budget. And then in the shaded column, you can see the difference when you compare the prior 2 years. So as you follow along, what's interesting, if you look under the third row, second and third row, it shows the A and B change, and then if you look in the shaded area, you can see how it's changed over time. And certainly beginning in FY22, where we dropped 132 K-6 and 49 7-8, you start to see this pattern of declining A and B, or declining enrollment in our elementary district. The actual decline in enrollment is greater than what's reflected here. These numbers are based upon an A and B averaging of enrollment, so that's to our benefit. But the actual decline was greater. Also looking in the shaded areas, you can see under the adopted or estimated budget, you can see the growth, and on the elementary side, going back from 18 to 19, there's growth of 1.4 million, a million, 1.5, and then our COVID gut punch was a $640,000 decline, and then a modest growth, 800,000, and then projecting 425,000. So the elementary picture is quite a bit different in comparison to where it was prior to COVID, and then in comparison to where certainly the high school is at. If you look down on the second half of that sheet, you can sort of follow along the same data points and see more recent sizable growth in A and B, and you can also see sizable growth in estimated, adopted, and estimated budgets. If you turn the page, some of this data is reflected in these graphs, and I think it demonstrates pretty well the relationship between our A and B and our budgets, and the high school. Sorry, I'm on the elementary on page 34. Again, we'll take a look at a point down the road at our actual enrollment numbers and kind of overlay those against our budget and other data points, but you can certainly see the flattening of the budgets relative to A and B. The high school on page 35, that budget had been very flat. The A and B also correspondingly flat for a number of years, certainly going back to 14, 15, and then a pretty sizable spike in A and B and in the budget. Finally, if you look at the last two pages, 36 and 37, this is just demonstrating the comparison of estimated budgetary increases in the general fund and the portion that would be funded with an over-base voted levy. So if you look on page 36 to the far right, that's our current projected year. It shows at 10, but that's actually projected for 2023 and 2024. Projected increase in budget of 425,000 with 71,000 of that voted. And then on page 37, the high school $1.8 million projected increase with 362,000 of that voted. And again, just within the school funding formula, we don't pick how much is voted. It's a calculation based upon our A and B, based upon inflation. And those two factors bear upon the calculation of our base and max budget. And correspondingly, our over base levy. So that's how those numbers come about. I think what's really interesting with the graphs is just to compare to prior years and to see when we've run over base levies, where the increase in budget was significant and didn't involve an over base levy, and where certainly in the high school in the 2014, 15, 18, those are years where we're just don't have the option of running over base levies and have very minimal budgetary increases. With that, I just wanted to give the board a heads up in terms of what the projections might look like as we look after our first enrollment count. We'll have likely monthly meetings to talk about with the board, just to look at where the general fund budget is at. Certainly the February enrollment count will be an important indicator. What we see in our estimates are based upon declines in enrollment between October and February. That's our pattern, especially in the high school. And so we've already factored in what we anticipate that decline would be when we make these calculations. Happy to answer any questions.
Any trustee questions or comments? Vice Chair Walker-Andrews.
Yes, so when we look at these numbers, of course, it's just how many kids are there in K through 8 and then the high school, but we don't have any notion of sort of retention of individuals. And the only reason I ask that is because you were pointing out that we see the increase in high schools while we see a decrease in the K to 8. And I just wonder how much of that is fewer kids moving in and more kids moving up into high school. I mean, how do we don't do it a person by person, so.
Yeah, and when you say moving up, you're talking about moving from our cohorts, our 8th grade into 9th grade. Yeah, so probably a better document to look at that, because it's more enrollment based, is our demographic data. And when we get that, they'll pull our enrollment information together, and they will look at cohorts. They won't look at individuals, but they'll look at individual grade levels. And then the estimates will also be based upon demographic info and estimated changes. And you're absolutely right about the impact of outside K-8s, because and that'll be part of our demographic study as well, as just the impact those enrollments will have on our high school enrollment. And you know, to talk about that point, if we look at our freshman enrollment in the high school is 1,088, but then if you look at our 8th grade class, it's 602. And so, you know, that's somewhere between 600 and 1,000 students represents the students that come in from our outside K-8s. And we'll, you know, fine tune that number through the demographic work that's done, that we'll hopefully see in January.
Trustee Decker?
Thanks. You know, one of the things that people sometimes will say to trustees or, you know, publicly is when enrollment goes down, or when we see something like this that says, here's our budget, here's what A and B is going to pay for, the gap's gotten bigger, so now we need to have, you know, a larger levy or something like that to make up the difference. The thought might be, why aren't we talking about cutting, like if we're serving fewer students, we should be spending less money somehow. And I was hoping that you could speak to the complexity of like how students are spread out, what we're actually talking about when we talk about what we're obligated to provide on a per student basis, like how it is that when we have a budget that serves X number of kids, having some small number fewer doesn't mean that there's just a commensurate cut that we can make. That's kind of a complexity I think it took me a long time to start to understand, and I was hoping you could speak in like layperson's terms about that for a sec.
I'll try, but you're right. It's a complex one, and we, in particular in the K-5, the K-5, you have the grade bands that stay together. So you look at our class size goals of 20 students in kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade, and then 28 3rd and 4th, and 30 and 5th grade. And so when you have a reduction of what was that, compared to last year, when you're dropping 24 students, and really 67 is the decline in kindergarten compared to last year. So it's a lot of new students, which sort of underscores your point, which is the reduction in students is spread among all of those grade levels and all of those schools. And so you don't look at a reduction of 24 students and say, well, there's a class. And so it is a little more complicated. And then what we've been doing the last several years since COVID is maintaining, to the extent practicable, all of our staff. And so that's been in place. And so we've had staff. We have had smaller class sizes, but not, you know, obnoxiously small. And so if we're having 20 student goal and we're at 15, that sounds like a pretty good class size for a teacher and for students to be in. So it's not 10 and 12 size classes. It's still you know, a reasonable class size. So this does become a challenge. And in the elementary, there are primary focus right in the classroom. And it's not that there isn't in the other levels, but there's not athletics, there's not activities, there's not all of the other components to the operation of the school. So it's in classroom education, and then you have support structures. So when you do look at enrollment decline, you know, the comparison of a $425,000 increase to just a couple years ago at 1.5 is significant, and it's not going to be solved by looking at the enrollment decline and where that happens at all. So you know, a way to put it in perspective is we typically see about $1.5 million as our salary obligation steps, lanes, increases, and so when you have $1.5 million as an increase, you know, that's right about the wheelhouse. You factor in retirement savings and other things to make that work, but 425 is a low amount when you've got salary increases that you're talking about. So we have our budget committee, and we're looking at you know, ESSER and other solutions. So this is when we start solving for that gap and trying to figure out ways, funding-wise, to solve for the gap. And the demographic info will be really critical in that analysis, because we know there's new developments, there's potential new students coming in. We don't want to unwind our operation at a time when we might be seeing students. So we got to be smart about it, and that's part of the data and the analysis we'll continue to share with you guys.
Any other trustee questions or comments? Seeing none, any public comment on this agenda item? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 4, which is to update the expenditures of ESSER funds to Superintendent Lodge.
Hi, everybody. It's always good to follow Pat, so here I go. No. And why I'm doing this is beyond me, but here we go. If I could get you to turn to page 38, please. We need to look at the ESSER funds as part of the requirement to make it public knowledge, but I think there's an interesting story here as well. So if you're on page 38, there's the elementary ESSER funds that we've been allotted, 18 million. And you can see that's in the upper right-hand corner under the allocation. And then if you go to the bottom right-hand corner, you can see that we've got basically 9 million or so left. We've spent that much in the elementary side. The pie chart at the bottom, you can see where we've spent it. If you look at salaries and you look at benefits, we spent it on people. I think we put it in the right spot, because that went to kids. I mean, that's 94% of it, salaries and benefits. So, and that, if you notice, what is there is that's through September 30th of this year. So a little bit into this year as well. 9/30/22, and so we've got 9,669,000 we're working on now in the elementary side. So then if you turn to page 39, same graph, high school side, the total allocation was 9,660,000. And you can see we spent the money down where we've got 4.5 million left. And again, if you look at the pie chart, we spent it on people. A lot of districts didn't do that because they didn't want to be on this financial cliff, but I think we made the right decision. I don't think it was the wrong decision, because we put it to people helping kids get out of COVID and compete in COVID and stay as best they could. Again, that's through 9/30/2022. So if you add those two together, the 4.5 million, and on the other side, the 966, we have about $14 million going into this year, starting on October 1. But if you look on page 40, you can see that our expenditures out of that 14 million are going to be about 7 million. That's what we're spending this year. So remember, Pat's told you numerous times, some of that's the balance. Just flat, got to put it in the checkbook just to make sure we get to even. So we're spending about 7 million, so that's going to leave us, this is 22-23. When 23-24 rolls around a year from now, the district's got $7 million. And then in the fall of 24, it ends. You got to have all your money expended by December. So out of that 7 million that's left next year, some of it's going to be needed again to balance. And we want to save some for the fall of 24. So it looks like 7 million, but I can tell you it's really down around 3.5. So that's the challenge. Pat's gone through the drop in enrollment on the elementary side, and we can do this for another year, but we would really like to have the commitment from ESSER into the general fund to start dropping, and we've been trending the other way on the elementary side. One year we were putting in a couple million, then 2.5, now it's bouncing up to 3. We've got to figure out ways in this budget committee that we can turn that trend the other way. And I'm not exactly sure what that is right now, but that's what we're working to do. So if this is our ESSER situation, I think we spent it wisely. We spent it on people. In fact, if you look at this year, 23-24, it's almost 99% of it's on salaries and people. So I think we're doing everything we can to keep our kids afloat mentally, academically. Barbara and Jenna and Erica are going to talk about that in a minute. But this is basically the ESSER update. This is how MCPS spent $28 million over 3 or 4 years. And kind of where we sit. So I think we spread it out reasonably well and didn't overdo it one year more than another. But we've got, as you know, the MOA was here tonight. They'd like us to get in the general fund. We've got art teachers, we've got academic interventionists, we've got behavior interventionists, we've got all kinds of people that we'd like to keep because it's been great. But we've also got the underlying problem. We just need to get back to even. So that's the challenge of, we've created our own, but I'm glad we did it. But I think, now the time has come right now this year and this planning for basically 23-24. We've got to figure out how we're going to start easing off of ESSER funds. So any questions?
Any trustee questions or comments? Trustee Witcher?
Thanks. How much does the MOA cost a year to operate?
Do you have that, Pat?
Well, we budgeted $1 million this year. We're not going to hit $1 million. That anticipated a larger student population, but I don't have exact numbers.
You've got 5.5 teachers. You can figure $74,000 as a placeholder. They're not, that's with benefits. You've got a few other things in there, so you're probably 600,000 maybe. I mean, I'm really guessing, but I know I'm reasonably close.
Trustee Decker?
Thank you for all this information, by the way. Is there a statutory reason or any sort of law around partnering with other school districts around something like the MOA, like bringing multiple school district funding streams together to make something like the MOA a more sustainable option in the future, enrolling kids who would not typically be attending school in MCPS but would want to attend the MOA?
I'm going to say yes, there are some problems with that because it's a little bit beyond me, but there's problems with kids being in one district, attending in another district, and where does the A and B money flow to follow them, and who pays and who doesn't. So you probably would run into some statutory things that you'd have to be careful about. I mean, I know where you're going with your question, but there might be some headaches there.
And if I might, I mean, I think the vehicle might be in the consortiums that some districts have, but I think Russ is right, just it's sort of a cost-sharing model. So some of the smaller districts, they throw in dollars to try and hire specialists, special ed support or PT, OT support. And so you'd probably structure it some way like that, where you're figuring out among your various districts how much you all contribute. And frankly, it seems like the state should do it because it's sort of like the digital academy in a way. And you could create the tuition payment much like we do now for the digital academy. So you keep your residential student A and B, and then you purchase credits like you do through to the digital academy. But yeah, there'd be some A and B oddities, but probably the consortium idea would that co-op that happens for special ed type services you could potentially do. Yeah, it seems like it requires a lot of school districts to make it. It should work with lots of school districts.
Trustees online have a question? No? Okay. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, any public comment? Seeing none. Moving on to topic 5, which is approve the selection of the Whipfly? District Auditor. Over to you, Mr. McHugh.
Yeah, thank you. So we've worked with Anderson Zermulin for a number of years, and they've really done an excellent job as our school district auditor. They merged with another company here late in the fall, and so we were notified that they weren't going to be doing government audits, so it kind of put us in a little bit of a bind to get our auditor lined up, and Whipfly provided us with a proposal that's attached on page 41, and so we're looking forward to working with some new auditors. This is what we're recommending that the board approve, is the selection of Whipfly as our financial auditors. This is a professional service. It's not technically required to be bid, but we did get a couple of proposals, and we selected this as the recommendation to the board.
Is this an information or an action item?
Sorry, this is an action item.
Okay. Any questions from any trustees? Trustee F. Garris?
How does this line up to cost-wise of what we've spent in the past, Pat?
Yeah, so our last audit was around 55,000, so it's up a bit, but I think pretty consistent with where CPA firms are charging right now. So you can see on page 41, the 3-year proposal would be 65, 75, and then 86 over the next 3 years.
Trustee Mercer?
And so why that length?
You know, it's typical, and part of it is that first audit, you're investing a lot of time, and so you're making that time investment worth some while by having a commitment over at least 3 years.
Any other questions? Seeing none, this is a full board motion. I'll take a motion from any trustee. Moved by Trustee F. Garris. A second by trustee Mercer. Any final trustee comments? Seeing none, any public comment? All trustees in favor for the recommendation to approve Whipfly as a district's auditor, please indicate yes by raising your hand. Trustee Hobbins? Okay, all in favor except trustee Hobbins. All those opposed? All those abstained?
I was raising my hand. I don't know.
Oh, you were frozen.
Oh. I was like, hello.
There we go. Okay. Unanimous, yes. That was funny. Okay, moving on to item B, topic 1. Approve the personnel report. Mr. Rott.
As I say every month, this is actually a typical personnel report, though actually pretty small.
Any questions from trustees? Seeing none, an elementary motion for recommendation of the elementary personnel report. Moved by trustee Witcher, second by trustee F. Garris. Any final comments? Any public comment? All elementary trustees in favor of approving the elementary personnel report, please raise your hand indicating yes. Unanimous to all elementary trustees present. Secondary recommendation, a high school motion to approve the high school personnel report. Moved by Vice Chair Walker Andrews, second by trustee F. Garris. Any final comments? Any public comment? All trustees in favor for approving the high school personnel report, please raise your hand indicating yes if you would approve the recommendation. Trustee Witcher? Oh. Unanimous to all trustees present. Item 2, which is to approve the elementary school calendar for 2023-2024. Mr. Rott.
Hi, I think I'll do a quick overview on page 52, 53, and 54, the draft calendars you'll be looking at for elementary, middle, and high school. To kind of let you know how we come up with these, there is a committee underneath that we put together under the MEA contract that has a middle school, elementary, and high school teacher, and we also include a middle and high school and elementary principal as well. The 6 of them meet. I'm also included, as well as Ms. Ballou, and this year I think we had a representative from the union also present. What we do is we look at historical calendars that correspond with the similar year. We look at a couple things. There are 1,080 hours of instructional time that's required by the state of Montana. Under our contract, though, we also have 187 contract days for the MEA. So what we do through this process is to make sure that not only do we have the 187 days, but that we also have the requisite hours in order to meet state accreditation. There are also some non-negotiables that we have to work around. For example, in October, there's the MEA days. We try to coordinate with the university for the spring break. I worked with the provost to come up with the dates that you see on these proposed calendars. And of course, that smattering of holidays. And I would also point out the February 12th date, which would be the twin of the February 13th date of this year. So that'll be the second annual presentation, yes? So we meet, we review, they take it back to get some comments from staff. And then what you see before you is that the final result of it. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you have specific to the elementary than the middle or high school. You'll see that they're very similar in terms of their start and end dates. There's just some middle dates in between. So for example, the elementary has conferences in both November and March. The middle school has conferences in November, but does not have them in March, and the high school calendar does not have those conferences at all, but has additional PIR days that are built in for high school teachers around grading periods and district music festivals.
When will we see Sealy Swan calendar?
Thank you. After tonight's, if assuming the board approves these 3 calendars, then there'll be 3 more calendars that we will work on, would be the Willard, the Jefferson, and the Sealy Lake. So they will usually work off of these calendars as well.
Any trustee questions? Trustee Mercer?
So my same question from last time. So in COVID times, we lost the spring parent-teacher conferences in middle school. Last year, they were left out. I guess I haven't heard a educational justification for why we don't need parent-teacher conferences in the spring in middle school.
The absence of the middle school conference is actually a math issue. With the shortened days on our schedule and the way the bus schedule works, if you have those conferences built in, you will not meet the requisite hours for a state accreditation.
With a end date that's the same, right? So that's not an educational reason, that's a math and convenience and money reason. So why aren't we having parent-teacher conferences anymore? I mean, they were here 2 years ago or 3 years ago, and now they're not. And I guess I've never heard an explanation other than it's math convenient not to have them.
I think it was more than that. My understanding is there was a conversation at the middle school level about the utility of having those conferences in the spring. And there was also a thought that they were not as essential as they were in the fall. So there was conversations beyond math about the utility of having those conferences.
Trustee Afgaris?
It's kind of answered, but just to double check, I know we did run in a couple years ago, and I think it was because of the conferences that we didn't have enough hours in middle school. Did we, I apologize for the stupid question, but did we double check to make sure we have enough hours with these schedules?
Yes, I run multiple spreadsheets, and like everybody else in the district, I go to Tracy Long to double check my math and make sure that it's done correctly.
Any other trustee comments or questions? All right, so we'll do 3 different motions. The first 2 will be elementary motions. So I'll take a motion for the elementary calendar. Moved by Trustee Afgaris. Second by Trustee Mercer. Any final comments? Any public comment? All elementary trustees in favor of the elementary 2023-2024 school calendar, please indicate yes by raising your hand. Unanimous to all elementary trustees present. Now on to 3, which is to approve the middle school calendar for 2023-2024. Are there any questions in general, or did we all ask our questions previously? We're good? All right. I'll take an elementary trustee motion. Moved by Trustee Afgaris. Second by Trustee Witcher. Any final trustee comments? Any public comment? All elementary trustees in favor for the recommendation to approve the middle school calendar for 2023-2024, please raise your hand indicating yes. Trustee Witcher, Afgaris, Old Person, Decker, and Hobbins, yes. All those opposed? Trustee Mercer, any abstain? Nope, that's all of us. Motion passes. On to high school. I'll take a high school trustee vote or motion for the approval of the high school calendar. Moved by Vice Chair Walker Andrews, a second. Second by Trustee Afgaris. Any final trustee comments? Trustee Vice Chair Walker Andrews?
It just occurred to me, people talk often about making Election Day a holiday. And if that were to happen down the road, then we'd have to revisit these, or what?
I'm not, if we made it a holiday, we would have to do some adjustments, yes.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying, if they really did this at the federal level. Right?
Correct.
Okay.
Trustee Mercer?
Could you talk briefly about the early dismissal versus now here we have a late start and why that switch?
Well, it actually has been a late start for the last year in high school.
Sorry, I don't mean temporal switch, but just between the 2 calendars, between elementary, middle school goes, get out early.
Right.
High school starts late. What's the thinking?
It would, because that's the way we've structured it. And the way with the late start of high school, it's easier to add and have that prep time, that hour in the morning than it is in the afternoon. And just that's the way the schedule works out. So in the afternoon for middle school and high school, middle school and elementary works out fine. But in high school, if you were trying to add an hour at the end of the day, that would present some problems. So they have a late start and have
Plus,
for the last
we
few.
don't have enough buses at the end of the day for everybody to get out basically at the same time. Can't get them home.
So we're approving these calendars now, but if we end up changing stuff, will anything need to be adjusted if we change the buses?
No,
Okay.
we're fine.
The
The
only
days are established.
Yeah, the days would be the days. Question that we would have is, do we meet accreditation minutes? So if we were to modify or change the bus schedules, it would just simply be a math calculation of making sure that those changes correspond with the minutes, and then we meet them.
Any final comments? Any public comment? All trustees in favor of approving the high school calendar for 2023-2024, please indicate yes by raising your hand. Unanimous to all trustees present. Thank you. Now we'll move on to C, which is teaching and learning. Topic is Missoula County Public Schools Academic Intervention Update, and that is over to you, Barbara.
Thank you for having us. You don't have to listen to me talk too much. I'm going to turn this over to the talented staff I work with. So Jenna is the head academic interventionist for our district. She oversees all of our academic interventionists in our K-8 schools. And we have Erica Zins, and she's our student services coordinator, and she oversees the behavior interventionist side at our K-8 schools. So they're both going to share the importance of these programs and the impact that we're having on schools. You'll see they look similar, the presentations, because the work is really just working on that whole child perspective. So it's the academic and the social emotional to create that whole child wellness package. So I'm going to turn it over to Jenna.
Thank you. Okay, so today I'm going to talk about academic intervention at MCPS, and I'm not sure who's cueing my slide. Thanks, Tyler. Just as background, we put money toward ESSER allocation funds towards academic intervention last year. It was our first year, and each building at MCPS K-8 had one additional full-time employee that was focused specifically around COVID loss and just academic intervention in our buildings. So at our Title I buildings, often there were already staff members there that worked on intervention. So they joined the team of interventionists that already existed. And at our non-title buildings, they were a brand new position created in that school. Some of the specific characteristics about what these jobs were supposed to entail was in academic intervention, we were working on academics. So we acknowledged that behavior is a portion of academic loss and academic gains, but also that our intent was just to focus strictly on teaching groups and academic intervention. Another nice component that Rob laid out, or Dr. Watson laid out that first year, was that it could be flexible, but also have main components. So we see elements at each building that are similar, but we also see a lot of the building's own characteristics and needs responded to within these positions. Another beautiful component that came out of it is the people that worked in academic intervention were required to work together. So we really saw some wonderful teaming. We saw buildings that previously hadn't seen gaps or patterns in academic loss that existing in those buildings previously, and we were able to pair them up with teachers at different buildings. We could do Google Meets, we had them go visit each other, but really we were able in that first year to kind of team together to build a really strong, deep toolbox about how to support our students that were experiencing learning loss. So what does academic intervention look like? In kind of the bare bones of it, if you were walking through the school, you would see highly qualified teachers working with kids in small group. So this is when we take the kids at a grade level, we look at their academic growth, and we decide kind of who's going to service them. So the teacher's always going to service them in the classroom, and then we have additional, either more intense or different strategies or additional time that is worked on in small group by teachers. What it also may look like in a middle school is you'll see small groups, but you'll also see co-teaching going on. So the academic interventionist will join the teacher in their classroom. They'll pair together around strategies that are highly effective. They'll pull additional groups in the classroom so that there's two small groups going on. But really, it's a direct reaction to what's going on with the data and the students. So the kind of data that we look at is a lot of the typical data that you see. We have STAR, ERLA, iReady, and our Smarter Balance data. So we look at those kind of big level balanced assessment data points. We also really look at intervention strategies and intervention data. So we look at kids. The beauty of these positions is we can really take some time and thought around looking at how they're responding to programming or how they're responding to specific strategies, and really spend some time digging into that, which in the busyness of a day, sometimes it's wonderful to have a person that can sit down and do that. We also look at curriculum-based measures. So we'll look at growth of students, but we'll also look at appropriate rates of growth. So students will grow naturally, but are they growing at a rate in which it's going to catch them up? And if not, then we have that person be able to sit down and look at the research, look at the strategies, and help the team decide what the best next step is for that student. Another key point that we looked at the beginning year and have carried into this year is looking at longitudinal data. So almost all of our schools expressed at the beginning that they really wanted someone to take time to kind of develop a system that told us what was working for a student and what hadn't worked in the past for a student, so that we had data over time to talk about successes and challenges for those students that are in intervention, and that we could build a better system around making informed decisions for kids. This is just some of our impact data. So this shows you by school and by grade level how many students are serviced by this one additional FTE in a building. So again, if you're in a Title I school, there's a Title I team of interventionists that are helping intervene larger numbers of students. This just represents that one FTE in each building. You'll see different patterns represented in here. Some buildings, like Hawthorne, you can see, for example, they assign their interventionists to specific grade levels. So they take their title team and they assign them to K1, 1 to 2, 3, 1 to 4, 5. So the patterns will look a little bit different, but the impact is fairly similar building to building. You'll probably see or notice a heavier trend in first grade, second grade, and third grade students served, and that is because that's where we saw the learning loss in COVID. We gave students a little bit of time to settle into kindergarten, or kindergarten often had more supports built in, and then we saw that really heavy focus needed on foundational skills and phonics in those early grade levels. In our upper grade levels, oftentimes they're looking at math intervention, and in our middle schools, we saw a mix of math and ELA intervention needed. These totals, too, just as a note, represent about 17% of students in elementary were being served or offered intervention by our interventionists, and in our middle school was about 18%. So in a healthy system, we usually would look for about 15% of kids to be needing Tier 2 interventions. We saw a lot of students, that was an increased number for sure last year and for sure this year. So the addition of one more FTE to work towards those goals was critical. We saw demographic breakdowns of every subcategory that we have at MCPS being served in here, and it's a really well-run system. The numbers you can see too will also fluctuate. We'll show you, actually, if you can click to this year's. So this year you can see these are the numbers as of November 11th. They represent about 10% of our students in elementary. We'll see those numbers increase because what we hope and what we see is that kids are going in and out of groups. So we're actually seeing kids come into small group, getting intervention, and then exiting back into the classroom or exiting into a different group. And we see some additional kids will join. So those numbers take into account all students that are served by that interventionist, and it's fluid throughout the year as kids come and go into intervention. And lastly, I would just add, I think it really echoes what Superintendent Lodge was just saying, but when we look at research, we're always looking for kind of that 0.4. So 0.4 tells us about what a typical year's growth, a typical goal in school, or excuse me, a typical year in school will gain for you. But what we call response to intervention or multi-tiered systems of support is that idea that we're analyzing what's going on with students and we're providing additional intervention, we're providing different intervention, we're providing additional resources to those students, and that has a 1.29 effect size. And that's what our academic interventionists are able to do. They're able to skillfully look at what's going on with a student or a system and then adjust for it. And we'd also echo that phonics instruction is a huge portion of what we do all day long, especially in our K-1-2 readers, which has a 0.6. And small group instruction, which is that additional small group that we're able to offer, is a 0.47. So really the movement of putting people in these positions and paying salaries to do that is trending towards that effect of why it's working. Yeah, so highly skilled people in a great system, I think, is a key to what we're able to start doing in academics.
This is an information-only item. Any questions or comments by any trustees? Trustee Mercer?
I need that explained against what are the numbers that you just said? Like what I don't get, what 0.6 what? What is that a scale of? Like what? And what is it without them?
Yeah, it represents an effect size. So it's a meta-analysis of research that's done about what is effective in school. So a typical school year and a typical growth is 0.4. Anything above 0.4 is considered better than 1 year's growth, which is what we're trying to do with our students when we're looking at systems or additional support, is get greater than 1 year's gain so that they're not maintaining the gap that they have, but they're actually beginning to close it.
So are you saying that this is actual data that the students on the prior pages have measured this effect, 1.29?
No, that represents using the strategies has that effect size.
So do you have what effect it has actually done?
So measuring data is measuring the real numbers of data was a little bit difficult. So we're able to show students served, but because the groups are fluid and they're in and out so much, it's hard to attribute. I struggled to represent that in a way that felt authentic I could have taken, I looked at a couple ways. I looked at, could we take overall data of what does proficiency look like at that grade level, and then what does it look like in the fall and the spring? But the amount of factors that go into that, as far as the classroom teacher and the students coming in and out of that one person's group, it's pretty difficult to represent. I felt in an authentic way that didn't feel, that felt authentic, I guess is how to say it.
Vice Chair Walker-Andrews?
It looks like in 2021, 2022, at the elementary level, you had 608 students.
Mm-hmm.
So is it possible to just do a random sample of 50 kids, 30 kids, something like that, and then measure the rate of growth for those kids? Because I understand what he's saying.
I know, yeah. Yeah, I think we could think of I think we could explore how to look at it. We really kind of dug in and tried to figure out the best way to represent it, and showing impact by student numbers was one that we were confident we could say was absolutely correct. I'm open to exploring how to measure it in that more data-based way, for sure.
Trustee Decker?
The last couple of years are so hazy in all of our minds, I'm sure. It's hard to even track when this started and what was happening in school at that time. But this is the first sort of normal school year that we've had in a while, right? Where kids are going all day, every day, and all of that. Last year we had several models over the course of the academic year, and although this academic intervention position existed last year, kids weren't there every day, and we had a couple different models and so on. So I guess what I'm asking is, will we have to make a decision about these positions, for example, before we have a full year's data to be able to look at on the impact that this is really having on kids? Because seeing what this kind of thing does in terms of the national research is certainly encouraging, but it will be really difficult as a board to make an informed decision about these positions and their specific benefit without that. I guess that's, if I'm hearing all of this correctly, we have a few months really of full-time in this school year data on how this academic interventionist position is having that impact. And if we could get data from the start of this year to the end of this year to look at, that would be really helpful. And maybe more doable, more in an authentic way? I don't know. I'm not even sure who I'm asking.
Yeah.
Let me help. We're not going to be able to go till June 15th and then have a really end-of-year review. We've got some other deadlines of contracts for people that happen prior to that. So we're probably going to get somewhere in early April, someplace, where we kind of call it good and say this is the best data we've got at this point in time, because then we got some decisions to make. So that's all part of some of the discussions were taking place in the small committees at this time. But I hear what you're saying. It'd be nice to have the final review and some data that we could work with, but we're not going to make it till the end just because of the complexities of our world. So, but we'll extend it as far as we can.
For public comment or for public knowledge, can you state how many Title I schools we have?
We have 4 Title I elementaries, 1 Title I middle school, and 2 Title I high schools.
Trustee Mercer?
So I guess just to follow up that question, just be really indelicate about it. Everything we just heard and everything we're about to hear is completely on the COVID funding chopping block, right? These all exist purely because of ESSER money, right? I mean, that's what we're talking about. And so I guess the question of the $7 million that we're spending this year is maybe a PAC question. What amount does this account for?
I think we have 12.5 academic interventionists. Anybody want to help me with that? Is that right? Yeah, so I think what Russ said earlier, when with a grant-funded position, you pay for all the fringes, so we figure 54,000 in salary plus 17%, so it's 75 to 80,000, and so calculator math here.
I'm going to go with 8, the over-under.
Yeah, it's 75,000, so, yeah.
Trustee Afgaris?
Excuse me, just a number question. CS Porter, it looks like, served 200 kids already this year, and they served less than that all of last year. Is that an accurate number, or is there, what is that?
So that number, CS Porter does a co-teach model. So it just means that academic, they have actually, I'll take it back. So that's our academic interventionist. They added an additional half-time academic interventionist this year. So they took their traditional money that's allotted to instructional coaching and switched it into intervention for this year. So that represents an additional half-time person also, but both of them are co-teaching. So those numbers look higher because there's 30-some kids in each of those classes. Yeah.
And we have 3 Title I schools that go into that middle school, correct?
Correct.
Any other questions or comments? Trustee Witcher?
Just when I'm processing everything, is it possible to share these positions among numerous schools, or is that a model that would never, ever work?
I would say the challenge of it is that most of the work happens at the same time. So really the heart of the elementary intervention blocks happens in the morning. And in the afternoon, they're servicing a little bit more math, but to share them, you'd have a lot of the same needs competing at the exact same times in buildings.
And I have one other question that you may or may not be able to answer. I think at a prior meeting, I would love to hear if the amazing teachers would prefer behavioral interventionalists or academic interventionalists. And I know both both would be the awesome answer, but it would be something I would be interested in knowing.
Trustee Mercer?
Yeah, and this is not a criticism in the sense of negative sense. I completely understand you're doing what you can with these numbers, but I mean, fundamentally, Russell saw a tiny percentage compared to others, but I don't think that maybe they were working a lot longer with people that, I mean, it's hard to pull from that. So I think, and again, like dollars is in competition with other things. I think you got to come up with some data measure. Otherwise, it's going to fall back to a subjective survey of the administrators and the staff as to what is the most valuable, and maybe that's all we got and just trust a professional opinion. But yeah, and I get it's so hard because we don't have a control because this is in every place, right? So there's no control group we can run it against.
but
I would like to just speak to that. So Russell, that's a great observation. Russell purposely schedules smaller groups and they have more interventionists. So they have a team of 4 to 5 people in the intervention room that are always running groups. And what they found for their school in COVID was doing smaller, 2 to 3 kids in a group for longer periods of time. They saw a greater gain. And that's again where their talented Title I team and their teachers that make that up, they looked at their data over time at Russell and they saw a greater gain there. And as a building, they had the flexibility to say, this is how we'd like to structure this. So that it is where it is tricky to measure it. Like we were talking about, Barbara suggested maybe if we took a few kids and just ran kind of some longitudinal data on certain kids, we can try to bring to you. But the story is complex and it's different at different buildings, and there's really great reasons it looks different at each building too.
I would add to that as well that Title I schools already had instructional coaches, and so their systems look different. So when you do look at these numbers, it almost looks like the Title I schools have less students served. It's because they already had intervention systems in place, and many of them have 1 to 2 instructional coaches using their Title I dollars to fund those. So those systems already existed, and this new position was an additional support, and those schools highly needed those supports. But the other schools, that is their intervention, and so they don't have a team. So the non-title schools, that interventionist is serving more students because that is the only intervention that is academic intervention that's happening outside of volunteers or things that that school is providing through their PTA.
Any other questions? Any public comment? Okay. On to topic 2, which is the Missoula County Public Schools Behavior Intervention Update. Over to you, Mrs. Zins.
Thank you. So you'll see that my presentation, Jenna and I did them together, so it didn't look like we were competing, but more just giving you information about these positions. I'm in my first year as a student services coordinator, so this is my first year working with behavior interventionists. But as they were created, it was along the same lines, a lot of the same thought of just supporting students and the needs that we had seen coming in from COVID. And so some of the purpose behind them, these positions are funded not with title and not with general fund. So all ESSER funding for behavior interventionists. And the focus is on the whole child development and the whole child wellness. So students can if they're well, then they can learn. So that was our whole point behind adding our behavior interventionists, because we saw an increase in our office discipline referrals, attendance, a lot of different data there, which is why we added our behavior interventionists. Our behavior interventionists, I meet with them twice a month, and we meet together as a cohort, so they get to work together. They also work together with the school counselor, school psychologist, principal within the schools. So when Jenna was talking about those teams that work together, that's their team that they work with within the schools. And each school, the purpose behind them is they all serve mainly Tier 2 and Tier 3 students, but as we go forward and look through our data, that was my alarm, sorry. But as we go through and look at the data, you'll see that just like with the academic interventionist, depending upon the student needs, it looks a little bit different on how students are served. And also, along with our along with meeting with them twice a month, they also have participated in some of our district's trainings, and we have some great sectionals also for our behavior and interventionists and our school counselors on February 13th, so they're an integral part of what we've been doing. All right, thanks, Tyler. And so behavior intervention looks different in every building. Often they'll work one-on-one in small groups, but you can often see them in classrooms supporting student behavior. And if they're in this supporting one student, they're often supporting other student behaviors in that classroom. So they can be seen all throughout the building. They work very closely with all of our teachers. And so data that we collect for our behavior interventionists gets even tougher than with the academic interventionists, but we do a student risk screening scale, K5, and we're starting it with our middle schools this winter. And the student risk screening scale is the teacher's perceptions of students and their externalizing and internalizing behaviors. And then we take that data and look at that, and then that helps us guide, along with our office discipline referrals and our attendance issues. It guides our interventions, whether we have alternate recesses, whether we have small group instruction, whether we have pushing into the classroom. So that's one of our biggest pieces of data we use. We also use the student voice survey, which is usually done right about now. And we look at that then in the spring too. Tier 2, we often look at, in addition to that, attendance, discipline referrals. We looked at our student contact time, which I'll show you, and our lunch and recess group participation. A lot of times our behavior interventionists are out at recess and at lunches supporting students in those other areas to help generalize the skills that they've been learning and teaching them. And tier 3, we have a lot of one-on-one supports and intervention tracking. They work on functional behavioral assessments, and so that's a lot of what our school psychs and school counselors had been doing, so that's a big chunk of time working on those, and so they support that area, and also they work a lot with our families, and they refer a lot to higher levels of care if needed with students, so they do a lot of what could look like social work too at the elementary school level with families. So here is the data that we have from this year for our behavior interventionists. So as you can see, the top chart is the number of students currently each behavior interventionist is seeing. So at Lowell, they have 2 BIs. Technically, they have 1 BI and 1 social worker. So the social worker is paid for through their title funds, and then they have 1 BI. But they work together very closely, and so we included their numbers there together. And then like at the middle school, like we had talked about earlier at CS Porter, we also added a second behavior interventionist because the amount of crisis intervention that was needed, we added a second position. It just wasn't enough people there to fulfill. And really at CS Porter, they have a great system put together where they try students who are struggling. They have what's called the return and regulate team. And so there's a group of about 5, including the administrators that are on this, on a strand. And then if somebody's struggling, they text them, they come get the student, they touch base with them, and then really to try and get the student back to class as quickly as possible. So it's really trying to get the student regulated and back to class. So they have 2 BIs there. We added 1 later, not at the beginning there, but later this fall. And then I tried to break down, I have all this data of where our interventionists are spending their time. And so I tried to make it the most simple. I had all these different ones, and then I made it more simple. So the bottom structure, you can see where I averaged out where our BIs were spending their time. And you can see at the elementary schools, they spend more time at tier 1 than they do at middle school because they're pushing in and helping teach some of our SEL curriculum, which I'll talk about in a second. But then, and it's kind of interesting too, you can see there's a lot of, well, most is spent in tier 2, which is where we want them spending it. Small groups of students, maybe working out at recess with a group of students, so we're getting more than just one-on-one time. But then a lot of the tier 3 one-on-one, this year is a lot of crisis intervention, so students who are really struggling, trying to get them regulated and returned to class. But really, the goal of our BIs is prevention and not reaction. And so we've been trying to really work that into our behavior interventions program. So here's a couple of reasons, areas why we added our BIs. Our multi-tiered systems of support. It serves academic and social emotional students. We have our school counselors who are doing a great job, but the amount of behaviors and social emotional needs of our students right now is way beyond what our school counselors can serve. So our brilliant admin, our district team added these BIs, which was it's been great by adding the extra people to support students. So really it focuses on prevention instead of reaction, and the BIs add universal targeted intensive supports. So they work at all 3 levels. And you can see that they support that strand. They gather and use data. They often will meet with teachers and look at their data. They often meet with the PLC teams. They really work a lot with the entire building and supporting students. They oftentimes will create behavior plans, come into the classroom, support teachers, teach teachers how to use those, and then that's stepping back and letting the teachers then follow through on that. So it's not just them working always one-on-one with students, it's supporting teachers to give them some skills or some ideas on how to work with students too. They reteach skills at tier 2 and tier 3 that are being taught into our entire school system through our SEL curriculum, and they reinforce expectations and lessons that our MTSS systems already have in place through the MBI programs. And they also support our social emotional learning curriculum, which we're piloting this year. We're piloting Character Strong K-8, and as you know, SEL, I put a definition of SEL in there just so some of our general public, I know you have heard a lot about it, but I wanted our general public to know really more about it. And the benefits of SEL, this is from Castle, and all these are from a meta-analysis also, that SEL leads to improved academic outcomes and behaviors. They have long-term benefits. They help to improve lifetime outcomes, and the average return on investment is $11 for every $1 spent on your SEL curriculum. So by doing that preventative work, we're not having reactions to, later down the road when people make poor decision making. So this is also what Jenna was talking about with, from that meta-analysis that John Hattie had done. These are also from his same, he had looked at, 250 different things that affect student learning. And so these are also items on there that the BIs work on that you can see have, once again, 0.4 is a 1 year's growth. So if you have these other interventions in place, students typically can learn more than a year's growth within a year's time. So by having your response to intervention, that's always your greatest effect on there. And then behavior intervention programs have a 0.62. Teacher-student relationships have a huge effect on student learning. And I put that one in there because not only do BI support that, but that SEL curriculum is a huge part. Everything they do is relationship building in that curriculum, so I added that one. Self-regulation strategies, small group instruction, and reducing anxiety all have a larger than a year's effect if we have those in place. Any questions?
Again, this is an information-only item. Any questions from any trustee? Trustee Afgaris.
Thank you for that, Erica.
You're welcome.
So anecdotally, we just went through all of our tours of all the schools. I made a point myself to ask each principal of all these positions that have been added, what is the most critical? And this one came up every single time. There was no question, and they said it immediately. On that side of the table over there, there's 4 former principals, and we'll add Russ in as 5. I think if we don't have these positions, our principals turn into this position. And by the principals doing this position means our principals aren't doing their jobs. Behavior affects everyone in the building. Behavior affects the learning environment for the other students. It affects the staff. It affects burnout. It affects everything. In my opinion, and I'm going to end with a question here, I promise, this is the most critical thing that we added during COVID. So my question to you all is, are we doing enough?
I would say we could always add more because we can go back and look at our, a lot of part of my position is not only supporting BIs, but going in and supporting school teams around behavior and crisis intervention. And we're always trying to figure out how to work smarter, not harder, and how can we be more preventative rather than reactionary. And right now, the amount of crisis intervention all of our counselors are doing, K-12, is unprecedented. We've not seen the amount of trauma and needs of these students behaviorally since, I've been doing this for a long time, and it's just unbelievable. And I've done K-12 myself as a school counselor and then as a principal, but yeah, it's unbelievable. Lots of research going on right now about it.
Trustee Decker?
Oh, I was just going to add to that. We had a presentation from United Way 0 to 5 today with Trustee Decker there, not in that hat. We discussed which hat she was wearing. But one of the things that we see as our incoming kindergartners is the KEA, the Kindergarten Entry Assessment, looks at self-regulation. And we have about 50% of our kindergartners coming in meeting grade level expectations for that very important self-regulation skill, which means that about 50% of our kindergartners are coming in without the ability to manage their behavior and regulate themselves in the classroom. So this is a very essential position, and it is validated through that KEA data, which has indicated a need across our schools. And I would also point out that there are some disparate data that we have one of our Title I schools at 18% of the students showing kindergarten readiness and self-regulation, and we have another school showing 60%. So, but generally they're all pretty tight, around 30 to 40% of the students coming in with those self-regulation skills that they need. So we do know that the kiddos that are coming in, the self-regulation is a high need, and Grace pointed out to us today that that has been something that has maintained across the years of data. She also did note that academic performance has declined since COVID. So the kindergartners coming in are also coming in with less academic skills than they were coming in previous to COVID.
So I'll ask this question, which is, one of the things that this COVID money, this ESSER money, was meant to do was to try to shore up systems that were not strong enough to deal with what we have going on. And there's a tendency to want to spend money in a way that then makes it so we don't have to keep spending it year after year after year. And in the vein of trying to spend smarter, I'm curious about whether some thought is being put toward exactly what you're bringing up, Barb, about how we invest at what levels so that kindergartners who are coming in with a particular set of skills are truly getting that nourishment in those early years, so we're not still dealing with COVID ramifications when those kids move into middle school and then high school, so that we're using that money to truly make those kind of great leaps forward by getting a lot of support where it's needed, and recognizing that crisis intervention in our middle schools and our high schools is really the name of the game, but that when I look at the amount of minutes spent on like tier 1 versus tier 2 and 3, that's where, all of that tier 1 and 2 stuff is actually really important at those early grade levels too, to make sure that we're building that foundation so we're not continuing to deal with COVID like 6 and 8 years from now, that we've actually done the intervention. So I'm just curious about what a sort of buffered or a pyramid style approach, what that would look like if we tried to spend our money smart to be preventative 6 years down the road.
So one thing I'd like to address with that, by having BIs in the schools, especially at the elementary school counselors are then able to do more tier 1 interventions than they have been in the past, because you have somebody also supporting those small groups and individuals. Although a lot of our school counselors would say they're doing tier 2 and tier 3 interventions also. But by also adding our SEL curriculum too, which it's just a pilot year, so I don't have data around that yet, but our teachers are teaching those tier 1 lessons, and sometimes our school counselors and BIs are also co-teaching those lessons, but everybody's using the same language, so hopefully that will feed into that That's a big part of why we brought in an SEL curriculum, is to address that. I had another part that I was gonna say, but you can go ahead. I can't remember.
I can address too. One of my biggest goals would be for us to have a full-time preschool program at all of our elementary schools. And that can be something that can become sustainable. You have to find funding for your first year. And after that, you can, when it's an early kindergarten program, we can receive A and B funding after the first year. It is a sustainable source of funding, given that this legislature allows that emergency provision to continue for early entry kindergarten. It is a sustainable system where we could put in an intervention that we would be able to sustain through the general fund after the first year. And that would be something that we could seek grants for, that we could use ESSER money for. Other districts have started sustainable kindergarten programs with their ESSER funds, because in year 2, you can use A and B to continue funding that program. So it is something I think that we could explore. Also, one of the things our department is working on that is one of my own also personal passion projects is to build a community school system across our elementaries. And that is another sustainable system that provides extended day care for students through grant funding, federal grants, and through our after-school 21st CCLC grant. So there are other sources that we can look to in kind of a grander model where we capitalize on the community agencies and partners that exist in our community to provide services inside of our schools to extend that day for kids. So those are some other things that we can look at that are outside of these 2 intervention systems, but I would absolutely advocate for a serious look at some sort of early kindergarten system, especially in our schools that are showing very low levels of students coming in with that self-regulation and academic skills.
Trustee Mercer?
So I'm afraid these are going to be more statements than comments. I just want to be clear that, in case anyone's listening, I think well, I'll speak for myself. If I could vote to fund all of these, I would. We are by statute not allowed to go over what we can go over. So it's not even a question of what we want. There is a hard limit coming. I believe the board should have a role in deciding those priorities. I believe that when we pass a budget 2 years from now, we should own what we made room for and what we couldn't make room for. So I guess that's just sort of a statement to the district that I believe there's a board role in that. Along those lines, so again, me personally, I'll be looking at data. My experience was not 100%. I had a little, when I was talking to principals, there's a little difference. I guess I would like to see a thorough survey of all staff. And to me, it's not a popularity contest. It's their professional educational opinion. What's the priorities? And we've got to make them. So I guess I would hope we would do that and we would have that information of what that actually is. Because I'm afraid you're not going to be able to give us, no fault of yours, data that's just like, this is the obvious choice. Final thing, Pat and I have talked about this a little bit. The only place I see to get extra money is the idea that if we attribute this time towards special ed, past a certain point, we can push that through without, as part of our normal, not part of our normal budget constraints. So I guess in an effort to save these, I guess I'd be curious to see what percentage of these hours are being reported that way, because that's safe, right? If it can be reported that way, as I understand it, that's not a budget problem in the same way. So I hope we could do everything we can administratively to log these hours in a way that we can fund them that way. So that's my comments.
Any other trustee comments, questions? Last call. All right, any public comment?
CC, come on.
I think you all know me, Casey Ballou. I could spell it if you want, but I think Tracy's got it too.
Please do.
And we're getting to the end. K-A capital C, 2 small e's. I appreciate the discussion. I've stayed pretty quiet because you'll find that folks are torn and want to keep it all. Like, when Meg asked, I was like, all of it, both. We want to keep it all. We want to find the best way to serve kids. we've done a lot of great work. And how do we preserve it moving forward will become the big question. So thanks for your proactive discussions on this, because it means the world.
All right, on to item number 11. It's 8:21. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.